Welcome to the Career Refresh Podcast. I'm your host, Jill Griffin. I'm a former media and marketing executive turned career strategist and executive coach. I spent my career working my way up and through the ranks of global organizations and startups, and today I show others how to do the same. Join me each week as we discuss the strategies and actionable steps to leverage your strengths, increase your confidence, and develop your career well-being. Ready? Let's do it. Hi, friends. This is the Career Refresh, and I am your host, Jill Griffin. Today, I welcome David Berkowitz to the Career Refresh. David and I met years ago when we were working on the Coca-Cola business. We were at different agencies, but we shared various parts of our strategic and activation points. And I've always admired David for his curiosity, his thoughtfulness, his intelligence, and his kindness. And as proof to his kindness, he started a free community called Serial Marketer. And yes, it's a play on his name. Serial Marketer is a place where people working in marketing go to get ideas, referrals, build community, connect with community, and even help wanted and post for jobs. Because I know I have been successful in connecting many of my clients with opportunities that have been posted on the Serial Marketer Slack channel. In this episode, we talk about how, as a child, David always had the sense that he was going to do work as he got older that didn't exist yet, that he was going to be working in nascent industries with emerging technologies, and he has continually created a path for himself, both as an employee and a freelancer and a business owner, and I really believe that it's due to his insatiable curiosity and his learner spirit. David's unique experiences, right? Starting as a camp counselor, a substitute teacher, a tech writer, a social media and e-commerce expert, video production, and then, of course, building Serial Marketer has enabled him to hold leadership roles in companies like Mediaocean, video production marketplace Storyhunter, social listening firm Sysomos, Publicis agency MRY, and then Dentsu 360i. He has contributed to more than 600 columns to outlets such as Advertising Age, MediaPost, VentureBeat, and Adweek. A perpetual learner, his journalistic eye has helped many marketers look at trends through the lens of the consumer. And this has propelled him to be a sought-after speaker at over 400 events globally. David really brings this refreshing curiosity to his work. So grab your notes app or a pen, because I'm sure you are going to want to take note of all that David shares. I'm going to put all of his information in the show notes. If you want to join the Serial Marketer community, please do so and mention the Career Refresh so he has context and knows where you're coming in from. And if you have any questions, as always, email me at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. Okay, friends, here's to possibility, and I'll see you on the other side. Hey, David, it's so good to have you here.
Great to be here. Thanks, Jill.
So let's start from the beginning. Take us way back and tell us, where did you grow up, first of all?
I grew up in Mamaroneck in Westchester County, just north of New York City.
Oh, okay. So local New York man. So from there, when you were thinking about yourself as a child, what were some of the things that you thought you wanted to be when you grew up?
Well, there have been a few of the predictions that I had that were eerily accurate. And one of them, and I think it was around like 5th or 6th grade, I was even doing some things like having a few of my own early businesses as far as a grade schooler can, with things like helping build computers or write songs.
Oh, wow.
And so Lyrics Unlimited, Horizon Computers, I actually had business cards printed on my home computer with those. And I had this sense around then that I would wind up in some kind of job or profession that didn't exist at the time. And
that's amazing insight.
Yeah, it was very weird that I could very clearly remember myself thinking that. And I was still I was not that precocious a kid. I was like on a path to be a teacher, or maybe something like just a little more traditional, right? Or at least where there was a set career path for it. And then especially once I later had emerging media in my job title and it hit me, I was like, wow, like I saw this coming.
Yeah, seriously. All right. So fill in the blanks between, being in fifth or sixth grade, thinking that you were going to do something that hadn't yet been invented, and then getting into emerging media. Like, take us through, what were some of those early opportunities post-college?
Well, a really big pivot happened my senior year of college, and I spent 8 years as a day camp counselor. I was a substitute teacher at a lot of different grades. Like whenever I was home on break and there was still the school year going, then I was I had a great resume for a teacher. I had a terrible resume for someone who would supposedly enter the corporate world at some point. And the other thing that I was doing, a lot of which might not be so surprising for those who know me, is that I was writing. I'd been writing like this, especially since I was like 5, 6 years old. I was writing poems. I was writing songs. I'd written, I was like the first kid in my grade to write my first book report on a PC and using like an early version of WordPerfect.
Wow.
And so I was carrying all that through, and then an editor of the school paper in college. And so I kept doing that. And then it hit me that maybe there was a way to try making a career as a writer first. And then, I could always go back, like to me, teaching, it wasn't an easy path by any means. And
right.
To this date, like most of the hardest work I've done in my life has been with some of these teaching roles that I had, even in short stints, including as a camp counselor. They're ridiculously exhausting.
Yeah.
But at least I knew what that was. I didn't know what a career as a writer was. And so the early idea was maybe I could get paid to write, but not be a journalist, because I didn't see myself. I basically had too much respect for journalism then and now to consider myself in
sort of the hard news field. Part of the business. Okay.
Right. And the internet, I was graduated in 2000. The internet was coming around. I at least appreciated that there was far more of a need for people who could work with the written word. Many more words were needed.
Right.
And so I was like, well, maybe there's something there. And that got me down this path into the digital media field.
Huh. So when you said maybe there's something, did you have a mentor? Were you doing your own research? Like, who influenced you into digital media? Well,
the first person who really got me going there was someone I met at this career networking event, not really a job fair that my alma mater, Binghamton University, put on. And so there was like one also just pivotal event that happened that led to that meeting, and that was that in college, a friend and I, we were elected co-editors in chief of the campus newspaper, which was a really big deal at a 10,000 person university,
right?
And but there was so much politics involved in stories that no one here wants to hear, but so heady, and kind of the stuff that's reminiscent of the Reese Witherspoon movie Election, with Matt.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah. Like that kind of stupid stuff that would go on.
Okay.
And my friend and I would basically just said, like, take the paper back, like you can have it. But then we needed something to do. And in 1999, I started a campus group that was to create a website that was sort of an alternative to the entertainment section of the school paper. And against all odds, I didn't realize that was actually giving me job skills. And
oh, interesting.
So it was giving me content creation skills. It was giving me management skills. It was giving me technology skills. and I had to. My webmaster reminded me of the Spinal Tap drummer, so I constantly needed to replace them. And so then it was like, wait a sec, we were supposed to publish this thing, and now we have to learn how to do it ourselves. So it was great. And then when I was talking to this guy at the Metro Career Fair, he worked in publishing. I was just starting to think, hey, maybe I could go and do something with writing. And he was listening to my background. He said, wait, you have a website? Again, this was 99. This was not something, maybe some of us had GeoCities websites at the time. I had one, but not something most people actually did as like a project or a hobby. And he said, you have a website? You should speak to my brother. And his brother ran what was then basically a competitor to TV Guide, but entirely online.
Huh.
And so I talked to his brother, and his brother never returned my calls or emails, and that's fine. But he got me thinking down that path, and I started to apply for some jobs in digital media, and I got my first one at this terrible tech startup right after school. But I just got to immerse myself in this pretty early on. I wound up getting this job as an editor at eMarketer.
Okay.
So this was just an incredible place to learn so much about the industry, right? Like, so it wasn't just, so it wasn't like just any place out there. eMarketer was taking this 30,000 foot view, as they still do today, and covering everything. And so one day I'd be writing about like this nascent field of online grocery shopping, and even being one of the first people to tour Fresh Direct's facilities. And then the next day I'd be writing some article about Estonian e-commerce, right? Like weird stuff.
Right.
And then I started this interview series at eMarketer, doing these long form interviews there, where I interviewed 175 different execs and authors and other influential people in the space, and just again, this like kid in a candy shop opportunity to learn, because I still knew nothing, right? Like I'd had no training in marketing.
Right.
I just like kind of knew how to put a sentence together and make other people's sentences sound a little more coherent.
Right.
But all the actual stuff about being a practitioner, I had to learn just and I had some great Sylvia Jimenez, Sorel Centeno. I had some incredible people to learn from there on the job at eMarketer. But like, wow, it just took a lot to do that on the fly. And then while, as I was writing all these pieces, and I was writing a lot of them about search engine marketing, a few years into it, the PR exec at the time, Mark Naples, who still runs Wit Strategy, he was working with Jeff Herzog, who was the CEO of iCross, who I just interviewed. And Mark called me a few weeks after that interview that I ran, and he said, Jeff wants to talk to you about a role there. I'm like, really? And I'm like, what do I do? And Mark was tremendously helpful. And I got to work with Mark a bit when I got over there, but that shifted me over to the practitioner side. And that directly led to my longest running role to date, working at another, at the time, search marketing firm, 360i.
Right. Okay. So if someone was listening to this and wondering, like, wow, you met these people because you were doing your job, basically, right? Writing for eMarketer. But somewhere along the line, those relationships went from, I'm going to say, technical and transactional, into mentorship. What do you think you did, whether knowingly or unknowingly, that changed those relationships into being a mentorship?
Well, I think one of the things that I was better at than maybe the average person was that I used not just humility, but my real self-awareness of the lack of knowledge I had in the space to my advantage, and that I was, and I like to think still am, there to learn. And so when I was trying to listen to these people's stories, I was trying to figure out what was going on again, because I didn't know very much.
Right.
So I'd have to also work a little bit harder to try to make sense of this in a way that someone else would understand it too. And so that also continued even when I wasn't writing, but when I was later at 360i, the reason that some of the closest relationships I have in the industry are with various salespeople and also a lot of these PR people is that for the folks who are pitching me, I'd often give them the time of day when other people weren't. Right? I didn't care how many readers eMarketer had versus something else. I didn't care how much, how big a campaign was that 360i was working on for someone else. It was just I just want to hear if this makes sense and what we could do about it. And could I then share this with someone like you to say, like, we got to run this by Coke? You know?
Right.
And some of this stuff I was learning about then was like really nuts at the time, right? But I was one of the first people who would actually take that meeting and sit down with them and see, even if I couldn't do anything with it, like I'd be able to go and just try to figure it out with them.
Right. So what I'm also hearing is, in addition to that early vision of I'm going to work in something that doesn't exist before, emerging media, you also then within your roles worked in unknown or nascent industries in undefined roles, and being able to really navigate that gray, right? I mean, I know you work for Sysomos. I know that you're at Publicis at the agency MRI, but MRY, formerly known, people may have known it as Mr. Youth, which was a top youth marketing and advertising agency. Obviously, Dentsu, 360i. But you were in undefined roles. How did you navigate being in the gray? Because it can also mean that, goals, performance is a little squishy, but you obviously excelled in that and were able to continue to prove the value you were bringing to a role. How did you navigate that?
Well, that was some of the fun for me. And so, some of it is I liked having that baseline of zero to run with. So, even when I was at companies that were a bit further along, I was typically the first person to have that role, and I was often coming in at this transitional time where there are just some major changes happening with this company, and then now trying to build out what the next version of this role looks like, because things were going to be very different, and I think maybe like for someone like me who I guess likes to be in positions where I wind up being that outsider, a bit of that underdog, right? Like not someone who's trying to create a resume for a certain role. It's just trying to see where I can add value and where I'm really excited by what these other people I get to work with are doing and building, and how they're creating value for their clients. Like, can I be part of that in some way? Does that make sense? But all of that has been really appealing for me. And that means that for a lot of these more like cookie cutter opportunities, like I wasn't the right fit for it. And so it was like we'd have to find each other.
Right. No, and I think that's a really good point, again, for anyone listening that's looking to sort of take all the collection of their unique skills and figure out, it is possible to create a job. There are jobs that are absolutely posted. We need a vice president of this or a director of that, but it's also very possible to craft and co-create a job, which I think is what I'm also hearing from you.
Yeah, and even at times like I don't really even get to discuss this much. I'm not sure I've talked about this publicly, but when I went to 360i, I had an opportunity to return to eMarketer in a more defined role, and so I'd been in iCrossing. I had this role with Unicast on the rich media side. And so it was very much like these two paths opening up in front of me at this fork in the road. And so eMarketer was a great home to me. You hear how fondly I speak of it. Like I'm still so close with a lot of the people who've been there. I knew people who worked there for like 20 years, and it's just incredible how they're even some people who are there today as part of Insider Intelligence. Like I actually worked with them, and it's like I love any opportunity to do anything with them. And I even have a guest byline through Mediaocean in one of the reports out right now.
Right.
But to me, that was the traveled road.
Yeah.
And 360i, I'm like, wow, they're in this very entrepreneurial place. They wanted to hire me in some strategic planning role, when this relates to other things you've heard today, that I didn't know what strategic planning was. I didn't really know what strategy was. I didn't know what any of this stuff was. But I just was...
Well, you were doing it, but you didn't know what it meant in a formal sense.
Yeah. And there was very much the sense that if Brian Weiner and Sarah Hofstetter, if they wanted to hire me, that they saw something maybe I didn't. I really liked their vision for where things were going. And I'm like, you know what? Like, ultimately, it came down to just, am I just going to take this leap and do something that I didn't know if I could do?
Right.
And so it was by far one of the best decisions I ever made. But I had two great decisions to make. Like it was very rare for me to have that can't lose proposition, and it was a very tough decision to make.
Right. So that makes me think that, you made a decision which was based on probably a mixture of the known and unknown. So how do you find that you tap into mindset and your instinct? Like, how do you hear that voice for yourself?
Yeah, some of it's also like when, for a lot of decisions, one of the things that I hear from others, and it could be a partner or a friend or just like a mentor. Ultimately, at least for me, and I'd imagine this is true for most people, is especially if I'm describing an actual decision, then what's been a common thread is someone will say to me, I can tell in your voice what you want. Yeah. And so I often won't admit it, even if I do know what I want. Like, I won't admit it. I get really nervous about this. But if I can just sound out of it to someone I trust, it then becomes very clear what I get very animated about. And then just think like, something else that, like, okay, this would be a good idea, but my heart's probably not all the way into it.
Okay, so I would take that to mean that you're a verbal processor in that way, that you want to talk it out with someone that you trust, and then it helps you make a decision. Is that a fair readback?
It does. It's a very fair readback, and it is that, like, just often when I have that hesitation, then I need some outlet for that emotion to come through, and to just and that is going to be the deciding factor.
So I want to take a little bit of a pivot. You're a well-known speaker at many industry events throughout, years now. You've been a sought-after speaker. You've also founded a marketing community that I definitely want you to dig in and talk about. And you've written, I think the last count, you something like over 600 columns for many of the industry trades. How did you also navigate that? Were you doing that while you were also working and pitching yourself to many of the industry trades and writing opinion pieces? Take us through kind of how that all played out.
Yeah, well, eMarketer was a great place to start that, because I wrote hundreds of articles there. And so I realized that writing was a great way to get to learn about something. When I joined iCrossing, again, this is where I realized several times that whether it was Mark Naples or Amanda Malco, who had joined 360i a little bit after me, and having great PR and comms people you work with can go a very long way. And and having had roles like that myself, it's like, I appreciate
they're treasures.
That unsung hero. And Mark told me, for instance, that MediaPost was just starting this insider series where they were looking for guest columnists, and specifically they were starting with the Search Insider, and said, why don't you go and give this a shot and be one of the first columnists, which to me was incredibly daunting, but was this great outlet. And very quickly with MediaPost in particular, what hit me was, since I don't have all the experience as a practitioner, then I'm going to use my experience as the consumer and end user, and then work backwards and say, this is what marketers need to know based on this experience on the ground.
But there again, you're also threading through the idea, like you said when you first got to eMarketer, of being humble and not necessarily knowing everything. So coming at everything with a really keen eye for learning, which also then tells me that, this idea of coming to MediaPost with the eye of the consumer's point of view, it ties back to that curiosity, because as well as I do that when all of us get together, we are nerding out on concepts that the consumer is like, I don't care. Right? I just need to know what it's going to do for my life, or how is it going to, save me time or be useful to me. Right. And we'll often think about some of the other things. So that fresh take on really keeping that consumer voice at the table, I think, is probably one of the other reasons why you've been tremendously successful. All right. So let's get into, you were an employee. You went on your own, you became a freelancer. And I think that is such a rich and important journey for people to understand, that one is not better than the other. There are different benefits at different times. So take us through some of that experience.
I was at a startup and they ran out of money. And so I did a bit of consulting, and I started setting things up under the serial marketer name. That exact time that I was laid off, I started the communities. I'm grateful for a lot of the experience I had in terms of just needing to learn how to do everything from scratch. But there was a lot I didn't like. And for me, the thing I didn't like the most was having to do business development and sales for me. I could go out and say to anyone, here's why you should work with MRY. Here's the latest thing from Sysomos. I was totally okay hitting up my contacts with that, representing their brand industry events. It was first of all, I was kind of bored talking about myself. I didn't want to have to do that. And I really didn't like having to just sell me over and over again. And then it's really draining when someone doesn't want to buy you and you were selling you. So it's hard to separate that. And the part that goes along with it that maybe not everyone appreciates is I remember there was one guy I was talking to very early on, Greg Narain at some event, goes by Gregarious, as a lot of people know him. And so Greg said to me, you're going to spend about a third of your time doing some version of sales for yourself, a third of your time doing operations, and then a third of the time actually doing the work. And I was like, that sounds terrible, right? I want to spend 95% of the time doing the work.
Doing the work, yeah.
Then I realized that some weeks and months it was spending 5 or 10% of the time actually doing the work. If I was between clients or something, and then I was just in heavy pitch mode. I'm like, when do I have the time to actually do what I want to be doing? And so that to me was really daunting, and I learned to have a lot of respect for those who stick with it. So for me, I was still just really looking for the right team to be a part of. I was like, it would have been great if I wound up being wildly successful as a consultant and never needed to look for a job again. But like, even still, I still would have wanted to be part of a bigger team.
Of a community, sure.
And it wasn't quite that easy, right?
Yeah.
So I was very happy to go and keep an eye out for like what sort of team was right for me to rejoin and where could I add that value and who could I learn from?
Yeah. No, I can relate to that. And, I'm independent now 5.5 years and I love what I do. I don't exactly have the same percentages that you just mentioned. I get to spend more than half my time, working with people individually or working, going into corporations and doing training work. But there's definitely, to your point, promotion that you need to do and content that you need to do to promote the services that you offer. So I definitely see that. And I would say too, what I know from most of my entrepreneurial friends is there can be a loneliness if you're doing it by yourself, or even if you have one other person, there still can be some level of loneliness. So you really have to strive to connect. And that's what I've been able to find is, a few different communities to stay connected to. And one of them is yours. So tell people about the serial marketers community.
Well, serial marketers, it did start in the aftermath of that downturn that I experienced in my own work, and but it was the one of those times where it's like, okay, so what am I going to do now? And I had this idea actually when I came up with the serial marketer name that was actually using a phrase that I first heard in 2015 from Aaron Strout, who's a brilliant marketer that a lot of folks know. It was at W2O and then Real Chemistry for it's been there for a really long time, and so he introduced me on another blog for some HubSpot event as serial marketer, not killer.
Oh gosh!
So I loved that, and so I should still probably pay him royalties for the name. But then when I went down that path, I was like, like a lot of people are serial marketers. Everyone talks about being a serial entrepreneur. No one talks about being a serial marketer. If you looked at Google at the time, basically no one was using the phrase. So it's like it would be really fun to bring serial marketers together. But then I was like, on the flip side, I started this with a really twisted pun on my own name. Like this is dark and weird. And the one thing I didn't want to do was start a vanity project. This couldn't be some Friends of David show and just like, oh, he's doing this because this is like he wants to be at the center of it. I'm very much in that Groucho Marx camp of not wanting to join that club that would have you, let alone start the club that would have you. So, but finally I was like, you know what? There are some ways to do things differently. Like I'm part of some of these other groups that I love, but people weren't using Slack this way at the time. It was a good way to organize conversation. Maybe there was a good way to bring some people together who weren't even like a part of some of these other groups and actually needed something like this. And I started with a single LinkedIn post, and it's grown from there to now more than 3,000 people who are part of this. And I'm like some days I wake up and I'm like, I can't believe this thing still exists 4 years later.
Amazing.
And let alone that it's still active and that I still get to just spend some time doing this and learning from people who are in it and connecting people there. It's just this really fun outlet for me.
Yeah. So take people through, I've used it a couple of times where my clients, my private executive coaching clients are looking for new opportunities, but they can't necessarily post. So I've been in there networking with people and then making connections that way so that it keeps the confidentiality with my clients. But there's also great thought leadership. There's meetups. Take them through a little bit more about what the serial marketing community offers, because I know people are going to hear this and be like, wait, I want to join. So tell them.
Well, there was one of those days during the pandemic where I was actually, I stayed in Manhattan the whole time, basically, and I was on the subway one day, and I guess there weren't a lot of people around to observe, and maybe I wasn't glued to my phone at the time, and I just started looking around at all the ads, which were basically they were basically all direct to consumer e-commerce companies. They were there, and they all kind of looked alike, and all just like a little kitschy and cute, and just that same degree of snark and wink wink, and in New York Insider copywriting, and it was all very good, just not very differentiated. And it just got me thinking down this path. Like, if I had an ad like this for my own community, what would it be? And that same day, I started sketching things out, and I came up with a tagline that to me still sums up the community, and that's marketers need marketers too.
Yeah.
And I mean it both on a transactional level and an emotional level.
Yep.
And so whatever that hook is for you, great, because sometimes you're in a new role, right? Like you need an SEO consultant. You need someone to say which kind of email marketing system is better. You need to start hiring some members of your team who people know who's just great, who you can just get some personal recommendations for. But sometimes it's just, we just need to know that there are peers out there going through these things. Like, we feel disconnected. And the number one reason people are joining is when there is this need state. I need a job. I need to hire someone. I need a recommendation. There's something that I want right now. And the wanted channel in the community is by far one of the most popular.
Right.
And then from there, it's like, okay, well, can I contribute to others' posts? Like, can I connect with some people? And people are doing business with each other all the time. I'm often hearing people after the fact. People have gotten jobs and great candidates through there, and a ton of people have got gigs. And there's a friend of mine I made through the community, Zach Rosga at Feast, this great in-game advertising company. He credits the community for being this lifeline to, I think that's the exact word he's used. Yeah. And especially during a time when he couldn't necessarily get out there as much. And so it's like, I see that level, wow, this is working, and how do I just facilitate more of that?
All right. So, David, this has been fun. Tell everyone where they can follow you, where they can find out more about Serial Marketer. Tell them everything.
Yeah, sure thing. Well, I'm D. Berkowitz on most channels, and LinkedIn, Twitter, and the like. The community is at serialmarketers.net. And so there's a join today button form. If you ask where someone heard about it, definitely mention this show, so I have a little bit of context and can get you right in there. And it's always good to know how people hear about this, right? Number one thing you see on every kind of marketing form. So yeah, it's just the more that I can play at least some small role in connecting people with other great companies, other great people, then that also, beyond the day job that I get to do, it's like I could all just comes together, and happy to hear what's on your audience's minds.
That's great. That's great. So I'll also put everything in the show notes so people can follow those various links. David, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you taking everyone through your journey and sharing your knowledge, especially the unexpected wins along the way, the unexpected strengths along the way, and how really all of these different experiences, you're collecting them, and it's really continuing to show up and pay off in your current role. So I think that's really important for people to hear, that there's no wasted experience. It's all being used. So thank you.
Well, thanks for having me as part of this incredible series. It's great to be here, Jill.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Career Refresh podcast. If you're enjoying this and you want more information, go to my website, jillgriffincoaching.com. There you can find information on how to work with me one-on-one, or my group programs, or even bring me into your workplace. I'll put the link to my website in the show notes. But hey, listen, before you go, do me a favor, rate and review this podcast, because it definitely helps me get the word out to people everywhere so that they can also thrive. in the workplace. All right, friends, I appreciate you. I'll see you soon.